Just as sensationalism sells in the mainstream media, extremely negative and extremely positive posts are what travel the furthest on Facebook. And so if you're positive in your Facebook posts, you're going to attract more bees with honey. And here's an example of that. I wrote this Facebook post here. Want to feel better? Tell someone you love how much you appreciate them. And you can see I've got 14 likes and, well, just one comment, but in a very short period of time. And you'll find that if you share positive status updates, or if you've had a negative customer experience and you want to dump on a company, those are the type of posts that are going to go the furthest. Middle of the road, vanilla, bland status updates don't really cut through the clutter. So if you were to try to approach your brand page like a public relations vehicle and share status updates that were sort of safe, politically correct, not going to upset anyone, not necessarily going to take sides, those are the ones that aren't really going to resonate with anyone on a Facebook page. So what you want to do is take a strong position and, if you can, be positive. In the SEO for Business course, we talked about how Google ranks search results when you search a certain term, what the information is that they use to actually stack those results and how you can get yourself to the top. But you know, Facebook has an algorithm as well. Most people aren't even aware of it, but when you go into Facebook and you look at the status updates that are there, by default, you don't see the most recent. By default, you see what they call top stories. And the top stories are the status updates that people have liked, commented, and shared most. So this is why the number of Facebook friends you have, even for a brand page, doesn't matter. You could have 500,000 Facebook friends, but if you're posting things to Facebook and nobody's commenting or liking, it's winding up on the bottom of the newsfeed for all your friends, and so no one's even seeing it. In the old days, before people were hip to how the internet worked, they used to say, oh, my website has so many hits. Well, my friend Katie Payne says, hits are how idiots track success. What a hit is if I search pizza, you're a pizza parlor, I search pizza, and your website is the 600 millionth result, right? No one's ever going to see it, but you just recorded a hit. No one goes there, because if you're not in the first 20 search results, no one's going to find you. But if I search a word in Google and that word appears on your website, you're going to record a hit. The same is true on Facebook. If you have a bunch of friends and you share those friends and nobody comments or nobody shares or nobody likes it, you're going to get it on that person's news feed, but no one's going to see it. So what you're really trying to do, as I said earlier, is you're trying to get people to talk back to you, trying to start a conversation. Now, the algorithm that Facebook uses to rank those individual posts is called Facebook Edgerank. And it's just about as mysterious as the Google algorithm is. No one knows how it works for sure. But we do know that when we get more likes and more comments, things tend to rise to the top. Sometimes you'll go to your newsfeed and you'll see a person who's a friend of yours will have a post at the top with no engagement. Chances are that's a person that you have sent things back and forth to or who you've sent messages to. So there's some social intelligence there, right? Each time you send a message to a Facebook friend, each time you like a page, each time you like a post, each time you comment on a post, each time you tag a post, you send out information that can then be recorded by Facebook to establish some sort of quantitative figure to describe your relationships on the social web. And that's called your social graph. And what Facebook does is uses those numbers to decide who's going to rank on the top. Now, if you really want to get inside Edgerank, there's a company called Buddy Media. And they actually have a platform for managing Facebook pages. You can run promotions on it. It's used by a lot of top brands. And I had a conversation with their director of communications, Joe Ciarella, about a report they did on Facebook Edgerank, where they actually looked at how it works and what works best. And that is available as an audio recording download in the supplemental resources for this course. And later on in the course, I'm actually going to take you through some of the findings of that report so you can apply that intelligence to how you manage a Facebook brand page as well. There's been a lot of research done about personal attitudes towards Facebook, and it turns out that in the developed world, in the Western world, where people enjoy a pretty good quality of life, people tend to want to separate their identity on Facebook from their business identity. They feel like, you know, that's my personal life. I don't necessarily want that to be mixed up with business. And so a lot of them will abstain from using Facebook for Business altogether for that reason. You find that in the developing world, where people don't have as good a quality of life and there's less to protect, people aren't so worried about that. They're just trying to improve their quality of life, and so they're sort of running a full force onto Facebook and sharing, and they're not so concerned about personal privacy because maybe they don't really have any personal privacy to protect. However, you know, if that's something you're concerned about, like you want to use Facebook for business, but you also want to be able to have your personal life there and not mix the two, there is a solution for you. Here's what you do, okay? You go to set up a Facebook page, and then when you're choosing the category of page, select, as I've shown you here, public figure. You can then set up a separate Facebook page for yourself. It's not a profile, it's a page, but it's the category of page is a public figure. So you could have a personal profile that's private, and you could set the privacy protections to just be your friends or just your family if you like. And then you could have a public figure page where you represent the business in a professional capacity. Now, you won't have all the features on a brand page that you'll get in the profile, but you can have your cake and eat it too, because you can segregate your two identities. If you set up two personal profiles and Facebook finds out about it, they can shut down one of those without any notice to you, and you'll have to rebuild from scratch with a new profile. So let's take a moment and do a little demo of Facebook Timeline. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use Timeline for Facebook pages. Right now, I'm logged into Facebook under my personal profile. I can see here my profile picture is here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to one of my pages that I have administrative access to. And I'm going to go to my podcast page. When I log in with admin access to my Facebook page for my podcast, I see the admin panel up here. I have no current notifications, no one commenting, liking, or sharing anything on my wall. These are the new likes that I've received. And then this is a graph of my reach and people actually engaging. Reach is kind of like hits, meaning I showed up on somebody's wall, but because everybody's default view of their wall is top news, not most recent, this could have showed up on 207 people's wall, but at the bottom, so no one actually saw it. These are the people that actually saw it because they interacted with it, and that we know for sure. So it's kind of like the difference between a hit, right, for the reach, and unique visits for people talking about. Would be a good analogy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few items to my Facebook timeline. The first thing I'm going to do is put the date that I launched my podcast on my timeline as a milestone. So I'll click here on Event Milestone. And this is a milestone. Now, I launched my podcast in 2005, April. So I'm going to, and this was when on the record online, my podcast was launched. So I'll hit save. And now that event has been added at the end of my timeline. So if I go down to launched here, it takes me back to the day when it was officially launched. I can add a photo here if I like. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the timeline one of the interviews I did with someone who's been featured in the podcast. This is a discussion with a public affairs officer with the United States Marine Corps talking about balancing the public's right to information against the maintenance of operational security. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and park a link to this podcast, to this web page with the date on my timeline. It was November 6, 2009. So let's get the URL. Actually, let's first get the permalink for the page. There it is. And now I'll get the URL. November 6, 2009. So we'll say status. And I'm going to say 2009, November 6th. Don't put this on my news feed. And let's go ahead and paste the URL and see what information it pulls over. I don't like the photo, so let's get a better photo. Well, I guess we don't have a good photo for that one. So we'll just take that. And let's edit this. I'll go USMC. And then maybe I can get his name in there. Yep. Okay. Let's take a look at that. Okay. And here's a little blurb about the podcast. And I'll go ahead and post it. I should get a 2009 here, show up here. Let's see, it didn't show up there yet, but I do have the event as a 2009 event. It's the only 2009 event I have listed. Now, if I added all the other podcasts for 2009, they'd all be here. And I could do that for 2010. I could basically construct a timeline of my organization's history here on Facebook. And that way, anyone could find these events when they're searching on Facebook or perusing around for information about my organization. Let me show you how to pin and how to hide posts on your timeline. So I'm going to grab a link to a podcast that I did a couple years ago, which I think does have some relevance today because of the presidential election. This is a panel discussion of White House press secretaries. In this case, the press secretary for First Lady Michelle Obama, the press secretary for First Lady Laura Bush, First Lady Nancy Reagan, and the press secretary for President George H.W. Bush, all discussing the business of being a press secretary. And since we're coming up to a presidential election, I'm going to go ahead and repost this on my timeline, and then I'm going to pin it. So I'll copy the link, the permalink to this blog post, and then I'll head on over to my Facebook page for my podcast, and I'm going to paste it in there. That'll bring up the metadata. Let me find an image that's going to go well. That's a good one. And I'll retitle the headline here, just clean it up a little bit, because everything in the browser page title comes through there. That might look a little cleaner. Let's see. It does. And then I'll clean this up too. I'll get rid of all that metadata that's coming through here. And then I'll go through and say, and I will go ahead and put the time that this actually happened on there, so that it winds up at the right place in my timeline. It was July 23rd, 2010. So 2010, and it was July 23rd. If I say hide from newsfeed, it'll go ahead and put it on my timeline, but it won't show up at this point in the newsfeed as well. So I'm not going to check that. And now I'll go ahead and post this. Now, once I've posted it, I can go in and I can pin it. So let me scroll to the top of the feed here, and I'm just going to refresh. And there it is. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin it. And I do that by just clicking the highlight button. What that'll do is make it 2-column wide. And if I go up here, I can delete it, or I can hide it from the page as well. Now if I choose pin to top, it'll go ahead and for a 7-day period, it'll move this to the top of my timeline, and then at the end of that 7-day period, this will be replaced down to July 23rd, 2010, back here under the July month in 2010, which I can revert to by just clicking on 2010. And you can see the post still exists on the timeline, so it's still there under July 23rd, 2010, but now it's pinned to the top as well, so there's a second instance of it. Now if I go here, I can unpin from the top, or I can just wait the 7 days and then it will be removed and go back to the bottom. So that's how you pin a post and remove a post on timeline, as well as how to maximize a post and make it 2 columns wide in your timeline as well.